It's 2023 and you want to start a podcast. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to start a podcast from scratch, from ideation to publishing, and a few tips along the way. So let's come up with a podcast idea. If you already know what your show is going to be about, you can skip ahead. Depending on your interests and goals, you can make a podcast on almost any topic. If you have a hobby that you're passionate about, for me that would be motorcycle riding, let's say, this can be a great way to share your knowledge and experiences with others and connect with a community of like-minded individuals. Alternatively, you could base your podcast on a business topic related to your career. For instance, if you work in marketing, you might create a podcast focused on helping small businesses succeed. And if you're completely stuck on podcast ideas but think you want to start one, try a tool like Answer the Public to find topics people are searching for. Once you have a unique idea, you can start thinking about format. The most common format for a podcast is an interview. If your chosen niche has a lot of interview shows and you still want to go ahead with that format, you might want to think a little bit outside of the box. For instance, one of my shows is called Indie Bites. I speak to indie entrepreneurs about their stories. There are thousands of other interview shows like this, so I had to think of something to differentiate myself. So I made my show short, 15-minute episodes to help me stand out from all those other hour-long shows. And if you're not choosing an interview show, I think you could already be at an advantage. You could pick from a variety of formats such as a solo show, a narrative-driven, panel discussion, news-focused comedy, or even the ever-popular true crime. You'll also want to think about your length and publishing frequency. This is entirely up to you and what you think your audience would enjoy. You could do a monthly deep dive 2-hour-long show, or maybe you want to do a daily 15-minute show. Think about your length and frequency and aim to stick with that. If you just want to dip your toes into podcasting and don't want to commit to something long term, you might want to consider doing a limited series of say 6 to 8 episodes. Now you have your name, you need to come up with a brand. This includes things such as your podcast art and theme music. Your podcast art doesn't have to be too complicated. You can write the name of your podcast in big text with nice colour or illustration. You can even add the face of the host, or maybe come up with something quirky or unique. Head to your podcast app, scroll through the shows you're subscribed to, and note down the ones that catch your eye. Then you can head into a free tool such as Canva and use some of their templates. Your theme music or audio branding is how people associate your show when they start listening. It can evoke a certain kind of emotion or can just get listeners in the mood for your show. We have a great free resource for finding music for your podcast, which I'll leave in the description. But you can take a look at sites like musicformakers.com or Bensound for some cheap or free royalty-free music. If you'd like to have something a bit more synonymous with your brand, take a look at a site like PremiumBeat, Artlist or Epidemic Sound, where you can license music or pay for a subscription from really large libraries. Now we've got our podcast idea and branding ready to go, it's time to get the gear to make you sound like a pro. You can go deep down a rabbit hole for the gear, so let me try and be brief and just give you a few great options. When it comes to a podcast microphone, you can pick something up for under $100. The Samsung Q2U or Audio-Technica ATR 2100X are both great options. They're dynamic microphones and they have XLR and USB outputs, meaning you can plug them straight into your computer or upgrade to an audio interface later on. Although if you do pick up one of these microphones, it's worth getting a good pop filter to help with those plosives. If you want to spend a little bit more on audio quality, I'd recommend the Shure MV7 microphone that has skyrocketed in popularity recently. It's the microphone I'm using in this very video, and I now actually use it on 90% of the podcasts I produce. It's a nice balance between quality, features, and affordability. It's about $250 and has both USB and XLR outputs. Finally, if you want to splash the cash, you could go with something like the Shure SM7B. You might have seen this legendary microphone on shows like Joe Rogan or Diary of a CEO. This microphone does sound incredible and I use it on some client productions, but as it's an XLR only mic, it will work with a dedicated recording device or will need an interface. It also needs something called a cloud lifter to boost the gain, so this can all get very expensive. If you do get an XLR only microphone, take a look at the Focusrite 2i2 interface, the Zoom P4 or H6 recorder, and if you really want to splash out on production, you could look at the Rodecaster Pro. Now it's time to address the Yeti in the room, the blue Yeti that is. You might have already bookmarked it as your first microphone for your podcast, but I'm telling you should strike that off your shopping list because any of the previously mentioned options are better. It's a condenser microphone, meaning it's more sensitive, so without a great recording environment, it's not going to sound very good. And I also have a personal vendetta against the blue Yeti and even made a website to stop people buying it. The last piece of equipment you should pick up, or might already have, are a pair of wireless headphones. This helps improve recording quality remotely and allows you to monitor your sound when recording with one of the suggested microphones. So you've bought all the gear and it's time to record your first episode. Where do you start? If you're recording with guests or with co-hosts, you've got to make sure they all have their own microphone. This helps isolate each voice. Choose a room which has lots of carpets, curtains, and not too much echo. You could also choose to hire a studio, which are popping up in towns and cities around the world at the moment. You'll notice that the microphone I'm recording into now is actually off axis, and I'm not speaking directly into it. This is to avoid some of the plosives, which are the sharp bursts of air that hit the microphone capsule. I make sure the mic is 6 to 8 inches away from my mouth, and this gives the best sound. You don't want to be sitting too far away from the microphone, as it just won't sound as good. Now, remote recording has become incredibly far in the past couple of years. You might think crackly Zoom audio is your only option, but I'd recommend checking out options such as Riverside, Squadcast or Zencaster, who all record your files directly from the device and it uploads it throughout the recording, meaning you don't have any internet dropouts or lost recordings. Can you hear me?
Your phone connection's let us down as well.
Are you there?
Are you there?
You there?
It's not working very well.
A question I get asked a lot is, should you record your podcast with video? And although I was resistant for it a while because I do feel podcasts are best consumed as audio only, times are changing, and in 2023 podcast video is going to be really important to help grow your show, but we'll come back to that later. You might also want to record a trailer for your show. This should be a 1 to 2 minute introduction to you, your co-host, and what the podcast is going to be about. Now you've finished your recording, it's time to piece together your fantastic podcast. Your recording platform or device will create editable files for you, often as separate files for each person. Traditionally, you'd want to pop these into a DAW or a digital audio workstation, or into a video editor if you record with video. On a Mac, you can use GarageBand for free. On a PC, you can use Audacity. And if you have video, you can edit on iMovie on Mac, or an option such as DaVinci Resolve on PC. If you want more professional editing software, on Mac you can go with Logic Pro or Final Cut Pro, and on PC you've got Adobe Audition or Adobe Premiere Pro. But ladies and gentlemen, there is a new kid in the podcast editing town, and that is Descript. Descript has completely transformed the way I edit podcasts, as it generates a transcript for your files and lets you edit your audio and video just like you would a Word document. You can start with their free plan too, with both audio and video. In your edit, you can add intro music, sponsor slots, remove unwanted sounds, and turn your raw recording into a polished show. Here's a few tips I have for you for editing. Make sure the first minute or so are captivating to new listeners. Introduce you, the show, and the topic, maybe a hook from within the conversation. Ramblings and inside jokes can sometimes put those new listeners off. Descript gives you the option to remove all filler words. I deselect all of these and only remove the ums and ahs, and then sometimes I'll actually add those back in if it sounds unnatural with them removed. I'd also recommend removing crosstalk where one person is talking over the other, as if you keep that in, you can't really hear either person. So you've edited your show and you're ready to get it out into the world. To get your audio file and show notes onto the podcast platforms for each episode, we need something called a podcast host. There are free options on the market, such as Anchor, which can be great if you're having a hobby podcast. But for anyone who is serious about their podcast, I recommend using Transistor.fm. I've been using Transistor for years for my own shows and for all of my client shows. It gives me a really nice dashboard to see all of my podcast analytics, allows me to easily distribute my show onto the listening platforms, and even gives me a super functional website for free. Put aside an hour or so to set up your podcast with your host, as we'll need to submit it to the various directories. For listening apps like Spotify, Transistor lets you submit this in a click of a button. For Apple Podcasts, it's a little bit more involved. You'll need to set up an Apple Podcast Connect account and then submit your RSS feed that you'll be able to find in your Transistor dashboard. But don't fear, this is a one and done process. Once you've done it, your podcast will be available on all other platforms. You'll only have to visit Transistor to upload your episodes, and then they're magically going to appear in all of the apps. A podcast without listeners isn't very fun, so let's get it out into the world. People find podcasts through searching the internet, social media, and recommendations from friends and family. So how can we utilize all of the above? Before you launch, you can build up a little bit of anticipation. Tell folks that you have a podcast coming. Use your pre-existing audience on social media or an email list to send out teaser clips of your show. Engage in communities relevant to your niche and draw them towards your new podcast. I mentioned earlier that I think video is going to be important for 2023 for growing, and that's because of the distribution you can get with it. The discovery for audio-only podcasts can be done with the previous suggestions, but working the social media algorithms with short-form video can really help take your show to the next level and show it to new people. Even if you didn't plan to record with video for your show, I think it's a good idea just to record with it and have it as a backup if you choose to do it later on. So that's it. You now have your podcast idea, bought the gear to make you sound crispy, edited it into a masterpiece, and then publish your show through Transistor to then share it with the world. Thanks for watching this video, and if you have any questions about podcasting, make sure you leave them in the comments. I'm going to respond to as many of them as I can. We've got a ton of other resources on our Transistor blog, and we'll make sure to leave those linked below. Happy podcasting.